Thank you for tuning into another episode of Teen Gen Talks podcast, where the goal is to empower the youth of Glendale and connect you to community resources, individuals, and organizations through interviews and discussions. I'm your host, Melissa.
And I'm Desiree. And we had the pleasure of talking to Tina. Tina is a Northern Arizona master gardener with nearly a decade of gardening experience and a master's in environmental studies. Tina wants to share her love of gardening by helping people create edible gardens everywhere. She believes gardens will help improve our sustainability and food sovereignty for both humans and pollinators. Hope you enjoy the interview.
Thank you, Tina, for taking the time out of your day to talk with us. We have a lot to discuss.
Thanks for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
Awesome. So to start off the interview, I want to take it back to when you got your master's in environmental studies. What about this avenue drew you to it?
So I kind of had a different series of events getting me there. And I think when I was doing coffee chats and things with older folks who were established in their careers, they always said, like, looking back, I can see how I got there, but while I was doing that, it was hard to see. So kind of the same thing here. So I got a bachelor's in creative writing and international studies, focusing on environmental studies. And so I kind of wanted to do everything and loved a lot of stuff. And so actually I started going for an international relations master's first, focusing on environmental policy. And I thought, I wanted to be in governmental work. I wanted to focus on policy change. And after going a bit in that program, it wasn't quite the right fit. And so I found this other program at the University of New Mexico, focusing on environmental studies and looking at human environmental relations. And it was just kind of the perfect fit for what I was wanting to do. And then I still afterwards had this idea of I'm going to do governmental work and go into that. And I did for about 4 years. And again, it wasn't quite the right fit. So after that, it was kind of what could I do if I wanted to do anything? And shifting to that mindset, I think, is really hard, especially in the current climate and economy and pressure from parents and other folks. But having the space to do that was really nice. And so the answer was always gardening. And so my thoughts were, how could I, turn this into something bigger? And that's kind of where elevated gardening was born.
So you started a free community gardening in Kansas. How did that opportunity arise?
Yeah, that's kind of where it kickstarted my idea of, okay, maybe this could turn into something bigger. I was working locally for the health department there as their environmental specialist and doing more inspection-based stuff in the community, not really gardening based. But we were located in this spot that was central, right by the hospital, and we were surrounded by a food desert. And so a lot of folks in the community didn't have access to fresh fruits and veggies. And I was like, why don't we have a garden, a free community garden here? And I guess they had in the past, but nobody had upkept it. And so I was like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to take this initiative. I was on a couple of committees of healthy eating and different growing stuff. And so I was like, let's do it. It doesn't cost a lot of money to get it started. And of course, bureaucracy, you run into different struggles with that. But we ended up getting a grant to help build some raised beds and gonna get that established and work with local master gardeners. And we built one right on the property and kind of made it a big community thing. And it has turned into a focal point for the health department. And they've kind of built it into people's positions now, which is really nice. And I think something that was absolutely needed. So that was kind of where I started with okay, I can garden, but on a bigger scale and help people learn how to do it.
And you've mentioned elevated gardening, and you're the owner and founder of it. Could you talk a bit about it more? And also, I guess, kind of piggybacking off of the previous question, what did you take from that opportunity and kind of the things that you learned there and then take it into your business?
Yeah, those are great questions. I think learning from the community garden was, number one, working with master gardeners was great because they had so much collective knowledge of growing locally specifically to you. And if folks haven't heard of master gardeners, most states and counties have them, and it's through the extension programs through agricultural universities, technically. And so it's a program where you go through like a semester long course that gets you prepared for growing things in your climate. And then you get a certification, and it's kind of volunteer based. And so you upkeep it every year with a certain amount of hours for volunteering and learning, and it's really fun. So in that, I learned like I wanted to do that too. And so coming here to Flagstaff, I was in Kansas before that. That was my first step. I was like, I want to be a master gardener. I want to be like involved with the people here. And not only did it like set me up with the skills that I needed for this area, but like connected me with so many amazing people and like really tuned you into just like the great community that is around you. So from the master gardeners, I also kind of learned like people need a lot of direction from the community garden experience. Like they need you to tell them exactly what to do. Especially folks who don't have gardening experience, which is totally understandable because there's just like so much information out there. And the internet has so much information that can be great, but also can be misleading. And so kind of knowing that I wanted to provide that source of like a reputable source that is based in science and knowledge in the local area and not just like trending things on TikTok. And which definitely still exists. So gardeners beware. But so I first got the master gardener certification. And then after that, it kind of snowballed into creating elevated gardening. And so the first year, it was like winter of early 2021, where I was like, I'm going to get this business set up. I have to think of a name. I have to think of all these things. And it came down to talking over with my family, like, what kind of names do you think? And some were really great. Some were already taken. And this one turned into like, it has so much meaning, like diverse meaning. So elevated gardening, I mean, Flagstaff, we're at about 7,000 feet here in elevation. And so high altitude gardening can be really tough for a lot of reasons. And so kind of addressing that with the name, like, I'm here to help with that. And elevated in the sense of like, I am 6'1", and so quite tall. So like, that may be intimidating for some people, but I'm kind of reclaiming that tall space too. And then elevated in the sense of you can take your gardening experience and knowledge to a new level. So that was, it kind of just like clicked. And I started working on all of the different factors that I just had no experience on before, like the marketing and the branding and the business aspects of it. There was a big learning curve because I had kind of the environmental gardening stuff, but not all of this. And it was hard, but it was super rewarding. And like, I'm learning new skills at the same time. And I think that's part of who I am as a person too, is like, I love learning in general. So it's like a lifelong learning thing. And I think owning your own business is certainly a situation where you are always changing and always adapting and learning new things. So I ended up doing all my own branding and made my own website and email marketing and platforms and did design stuff. So there's my little sticker that I designed. Yeah. So yeah, that's been very rewarding, and I've really loved it so far.
So you're a one person operation. How do you keep the healthy balance of managing a business and life outside of your business?
I will get back to you on that. That's also a great question. And I think creating boundaries for yourself with people and making space for what's important to you in your life. So I think initially with a lot of small businesses, they're like, I got to work all the time. I got to work weekends. I got to do this. And I'm in a privileged space where I'm not the sole breadwinner in the home. And so it gives me a little bit more space to be flexible of saying, I want to also focus on my family and on hobbies and on like creating mental health space and doing these things. So I'm coming from a place where I can do that. And I'm very fortunate to be able to do that. So there's that. But I try to keep weekends open for other things of relaxing or hiking or reading or whatever. Sometimes it doesn't work out that way. But I kind of try to take things in stride of being flexible with my time. And I think that's the nice thing about owning your own business, but also not the nice thing, because sometimes your business can take over a little bit, or you can say, this can wait. I have all these other things to do. So it's all about prioritizing and figuring out what is the most valuable in your life, I think.
And you mentioned this a bit prior, the marketing aspect of, a business. So in the beginning stages, how did you figure out, I guess, how to market yourself and put your business out there so that people could find out about it?
Yeah. I will first say that I still have not done any paid marketing, because I think there are a lot of opportunities in social media platforms to look at unpaid marketing first. Just with the way social media algorithms work, there's so much complexity in it. And I am not going to pretend like I know all of that. But I certainly tried to get in on what will resonate with people, as far as reaching the most amount of people in the most relatable way, to kind of show them like, you can learn these things in small digestible steps. And that's kind of the thought with reels or tutorials or things like that. And so my thoughts with that were, I can do some reels that are like snippets of ideas or like how to do certain things, and then kind of guide them in longer workshops. And so workshops I've also been offering online through like Zoom based, or you can download the Zooms after the fact. But in person has really been invaluable too. Just creating those community connections with the master gardeners and with a bunch of different food-based groups here have been just awesome. Flagstaff is a small enough community where word of mouth is very important. And so I go to a bunch of farmers markets and kind of I sell plants in the spring, I sell seeds year round. And I also it's harder to sell like consultations and non-tangible things. But I also sell those there, and kind of just getting yourself out there and talking to people. And I am an introvert by nature, so that is not a nice, fun thing for me to do. But it's kind of necessary when you're a one-person operation. And I think when you're passionate about something, it just makes it so much more easier to talk about and relate to people. And farmers markets and different events here locally have really been, I think, some of the most inspiring, because I meet so many amazing people. And a lot of people actually I have first met on Instagram, and then they come over and talk to me and like, oh, I follow you on Instagram, or they come and say, hi, Elevated Gardening. And I'm like, I do have a name too. So yeah, it's kind of been a mix of both. Like, how can I reach people socially on platforms, but also in person? And I think asking a lot of folks locally what they like and what they need to is really important.
What is some advice that you would give anyone listening if they believe they don't have a green thumb?
Yeah, I think honestly, green thumb is kind of a myth. And I tell my clients all the time, like, killing plants is an initiation into gardening. I kill plants all the time. And it's normal and it's okay. And I joke all the time, like, house plants are just not my jam. I kill them all the time. I have some that are like really hardy that can deal with my neglect, but overall, like, I'd much rather grow outdoors food stuff. But it's all about like learning in steps. And so generally what I tell like beginner clients is we focus on like what they like to eat, and then the skill level it takes for each of these things. So some really great like beginner gardening stuff are leafy greens. So like lettuce or spinach or things like that. They're quick growing, they're pretty forgiving, and you can grow them in less sun than a lot of other vegetable plants. Leafy greens and herbs, great place to start. And a lot of them can be grown in pots, on patios, on balconies. So, apartment gardening is totally doable too. And if you don't have enough sun, there are grow lights now. You can grow them indoors.
You mentioned a bit of the misconceptions in gardening. What is one, I guess, popular misconception in gardening that you can think of that people may have or that you've heard?
Hmm. I think the green thumb is one for sure. Like people, those are the comments I get a lot is, oh, you have such a green thumb. And I'm thinking like, this is a decade's worth of knowledge, my friend.
Okay.
This is like learning through other people and learning from my mistakes. And I don't think people are just born with the skill. I think it's very much learned and it takes a while. Another thing is like, you can't learn everything from a soundbite of a reel. It's just not going to happen. And I think some people just want to learn really quickly sometimes. And gardening takes a lot more work than just like you put the plant out there and leave it alone. And so sometimes people want a really hands-off approach, and that generally just doesn't work with growing your own food.
So where do you hope elevated gardening goes in the future?
Yeah. So I have been starting to partner with a couple of local landscaping companies to help actually build these gardens in places. And so I prefer to do like the hardscaping and the consultation and the planning, whereas they generally like to do, or I'm sorry, I do the softscaping, whereas they generally like to do the hardscaping of like the building with the rocks and the beds and all that good stuff. And I'm like, you do your thing. So it's nice to create collaborations, and I've worked with a couple, and I'm hoping to kind of expand that a little bit more locally for what I can offer, and just continue to offer things, I think, both in person locally to folks, but also on the virtual platform. And I know that some gardeners and teachers are getting into like creating streamlined classes. So potentially like in the next 5 years or so, be a great thing that I'd like to pursue is I love like teaching people about gardening. And so doing like an online workshop with interactive thing would be a lot of fun.
Such a random question, but is there something that you really enjoy like growing over like other things? Like whether that be like, I don't know, flower or an herb or, like vegetables.
Yes. Tomatoes. I love tomatoes. And I think some people don't realize there are over 10,000 varieties of tomatoes that exist in the world.
Wow.
And the ones you see at the grocery store are just a very limited snapshot of what you can get. Farmers markets are going to have a lot more. They're still not going to have 10,000 varieties. So what I have been looking into recently, especially with growing seeds locally for my seed shop, is growing things that are going to be adapted to our growing area and other like high altitude, short season growing climates. And so there are some tomato varieties that ripen earlier that can deal with a little bit of cold, which is wild because they're a warm season crop that can like not withstand any frost. The amount of work that a lot of like tomato breeders go into to find these things are just mind blowing and amazing. So I piggyback off of all their knowledge. But the fantastic thing about seeds and growing them out in your own area is they become adapted to your microclimate. And so if you grow tomatoes out this year and you save the seeds from those tomatoes, the next year they're going to be even more adapted to growing in that space. So even like your home compared to a home like 2 miles away, it's going to do better for you because it's grown there. And so it's like this, the epigenetics in growing fruits and vegetables is amazing too. So I've been working on that with tomatoes and hoping to launch my updated seed shop soon with a whole bunch of really fun tomato varieties this year.
That's so cool. I like, yeah, like you're sharing knowledge that like I didn't know. So I don't know. I love seeing your passion too about all of this. Like it just gets me so excited seeing your love for like gardening and all that. I don't just wanted to let you know.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, I just get like jazzed. Just a simple thing like tomatoes. And it's ironic because my husband hates tomatoes, like will not eat them. So here I am growing like 25 tomato plants. He's like, what are you gonna do with all that? Like, don't worry, I have friends.
So before we end, we have some rapid fire questions. The first question is, what is your favorite color?
Yeah, I love purple or teal, kind of like jewel tone type colors.
When are you the happiest?
Oh, I think when I'm outside in my garden.
Knowing what you know now, what advice would you give your 18-year-old self?
Oh my gosh. Trying to think back to that person who was very different. Um, I think just keep following what you're passionate about and you'll get to where you need to be.
If you could have three people, dead or alive, for dinner guests, who would they be?
I think Ansel Adams would be a fun one. A really famous landscape photographer. I used to also be in photography for one of my majors. Let's see. Aaron would also be pretty fantastic. I do some blog writing, transitioning podcasts into blogs, and one was on Harriet Tubman, and she had this amazing history of working with medicinal plants and using that as a healer in her community and with the folks she encountered, which was so fascinating to me and something that you don't hear too much about her. And the third, gosh, I'm having a hard time. Probably anyone plant-based, plant-related.
What do you want your legacy to be?
Oh, that's such a sweet question. I think that I was a very passionate person who helped people do what they love and grow food and enjoy life.
What is a book that you have recently read or are currently reading that you would recommend?
Yeah, so there is one that I generally wouldn't pick this up, but this book is Tea Gardening for Beginners. And I have, experience growing herbs, but I don't specifically grow tea gardens. However, I have helped some clients. And so Julia DeMacos wrote this year, just full of like watercolor based paintings and lots of really great info on growing your own tea garden, which like teas have become such a great like way into different growing and herbs, and she has so much information on how to do it, but also the background of all of these things, like the historical background, which I find really fascinating. And then kind of breaks it down of like the type of herb and what it looks like and how to care for it. And she's a really great Instagram friend too. We've done some collaborations. So this is a really fun one this year. She's also on Instagram as Julia DeMacos, I believe.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Tina. We learned a lot about you. Thank you for taking your time out of your day to sit down with us and talk. Can you let everyone at home know about any upcoming projects and where they could connect with you?
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. I always love talking about this, but I really appreciated this opportunity to chat with both of you and reach some of the folks that you all talk to as well. So I mentioned a bit that I have an online seed shop, but I will be updating it in the next month or so with the 2023 online varieties. And so there's going to be a lot of really, really cool tomatoes. One that I actually have it on my table because I'm in the process of saving seeds. It's called Thunder Mountain, and it's like huge and black, but it also has like an orange underbelly, and just it's incredible and delicious, and one of the rare varieties that was kind of like a cross that was bred in New Mexico. And so I was wondering like the genetics of it, how did it do so great in Flagstaff, because we generally can't grow big tomatoes like that. And It was grown at high altitude in New Mexico. And so it made so much sense of like, these genetics are made for areas like mine. So lots of tomatoes, and there will be some peppers and beans and also lots of flowers. And so I'm doing the back end work on that right now, and then hoping to focus on some more workshops and stuff online in the coming months as well. And so you can connect with me. My website is probably the best place to stay up to date. It's elevated-gardening.com. And if you sign up for the email list, you get notifications on what I'm doing and what's going on. But I'm also on Instagram and Facebook and TikTok as Elevated Gardening AZ. And I love connecting with people there too.
Awesome. Well, once again, thank you so much. We really loved having you on here and learning more about gardening and all its wonders that it comes with. And yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you again for having me. This was super fun.
Did you enjoy this episode? I'm sure you did. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram and Facebook at MyGlendaleLAC.
And follow us on Spotify and Apple or anywhere where you get your podcast from at Teen Gen Talks, the podcast. Also, make sure to give us a like and subscribe to the YouTube channel, Glenville Library Arts and Culture, where we post the full episode videos every Friday at 4:30 p.m.